Why is religion, in nearly every form, seems obsessed with rules, obedience, and hierarchy, while claiming to speak for an all-loving God? If religion was truly about the divine, then why has it so often aligned itself with empires, kings, and crusades, rather than compassion, peace, or truth? Let's be honest, religion, as a system, was never truly about God. It was about control. Today, I will explain this to you. But before that, please subscribe, because here we try to speak from enlightenment, not from human opinions. We hold high the idea of the true God whose existence doesn't depend on human consciousness. This isn't an attack on personal faith or spiritual connection. What we're talking about is institutionalized religion, organized hierarchical systems that claim exclusive access to truth while demanding obedience from their followers. From Christianity to Islam, Hinduism to Buddhism, Judaism to countless tribal traditions, organized religion has often been less about divine enlightenment and more about power, social, political, and psychological power. Let's walk through history and look at how religion, time and time again, has been used to dominate and control humans instead of pointing to the divine like they claim. 1. Religion legitimizes authority. From ancient civilizations to the modern era, religion has served as a rubber stamp for power. In Egypt, pharaohs weren't just rulers, they were gods incarnate. Their commands weren't up for debate, because disobedience wasn't just treason, it was blasphemy. The Roman emperors followed suit, gradually elevating themselves from divinely favored to outright divine. Augustus, the first emperor, was declared son of a god. His successors went further. Temples were built in their names. Prayers were offered in their honor. China had its own version. The mandate of heaven wasn't a democratic ideal, it was a tool. A ruler was said to govern with divine blessing. Natural disasters, rebellions, those were signs the mandate had been lost. But while in power, the emperor was untouchable, not because of reason, but because of religion. Medieval Europe perfected this alignment of throne and altar. Monarchs ruled by the grace of God. The Catholic Church didn't just support kings, it made them. Without the Church's blessing, a crown meant little. The Pope could excommunicate a ruler, which essentially stripped them of political legitimacy. It wasn't a negotiation. It was spiritual blackmail. Even today, politicians wrap themselves in scripture and prayer to appear righteous. It's not about faith, it's about optics. If a leader claims divine endorsement, opposition becomes sacrilege. That's how religion shields power, from criticism, from dissent, from accountability. 2. Religion controls behavior through fear and guilt. Most religions claim to offer moral guidance. But the mechanism they use isn't compassion. It's fear, it's guilt, it's surveillance dressed up as salvation. From the moment you're born, you're told you're being watched, not just by people, but by an invisible deity who reads your thoughts and judges your soul. Do the right thing, and you're promised an eternal paradise, golden streets, divine love, and everlasting joy. Do the wrong thing, and you're doomed to eternal pain, fire, demons, and darkness without end. This is not just motivation, it's coercion. Christianity famously turned hell into a psychological weapon. Eternal torment for finite sins. A thought crime could land you in fire. Lust, doubt, pride, punishable by divine torture. Islam's Jahannam is equally vivid, with levels of suffering based on the degree of sin. Hinduism, too, instills the fear of reincarnation into lower castes or demonic realms. And even Buddhism, despite its reputation, describes horrifying hells meant to discourage unwholesome behavior. This is classic behavioral conditioning. Carrot and stick. Heaven and hell. Obey and be rewarded. Question and suffer. It teaches compliance, not morality. Spirituality, at its core, should be about growth and understanding. But this isn't about soul-searching. It's about social control, dressed in divine robes. 3. Religion enforces social hierarchies. Religion doesn't just guide the spirit, it defines the pecking order. It tells you who's on top, who's on the bottom, and why that's God's will. In Hinduism, the caste system was justified through ancient scriptures. Being born a Brahmin wasn't just lucky, it was divinely ordained. Dalits, the so-called untouchables, were told they were impure, spiritually inferior. That wasn't just social, it was cosmic. And even though the system is now illegal, its roots remain embedded in religious doctrine. In Christianity, women have long been second-class citizens. Verses like "Wives, submit to your husbands" weren't fringe ideas, they were central teachings. They gave men divine permission to dominate, and women divine obligation to obey. For centuries, female voices were silenced in churches, councils, and households, not because of ability, but because of scripture. Islamic states using Sharia law often codify inequality. Women's testimony in court may be worth half that of a man. In some countries, women can't drive, can't travel without a male guardian, and can't choose their own clothing, all under the banner of religious obedience. Even in Buddhism, the image of peace and enlightenment hasn't stopped monks in Myanmar from supporting ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims. The rationale: nationalism fused with religion. Purity of blood, purity of belief. It's not just policy, it's prophecy. Religion justifies hierarchy not by argument, but by revelation. And that makes it harder to challenge, because you're not just disagreeing with a person, you're disagreeing with God. 4. Religion controls knowledge and information. For centuries, religious institutions decided what could be known. They dictated what was true, and anything outside that scope was labeled heresy. The Catholic Church didn't just preach, it censored. It controlled libraries. It burned books. It punished thinkers. Galileo wasn't jailed for bad science. He was jailed for challenging theological authority. He said the earth orbited the sun, a conclusion backed by evidence. But that contradicted scripture. So he was silenced. Not because he was wrong, but because he threatened control. The Bible was intentionally kept in Latin, a language few commoners understood. That meant priests were the gatekeepers of divine truth. If you wanted salvation, you needed their translation, their interpretation, and their authority. Independent thought was dangerous because it weakened the monopoly on truth. Islamic history tells a similar story. During the Golden Age, science, medicine, and philosophy thrived until conservative backlash ended it. Scholars were accused of blasphemy. Libraries were destroyed. Rationalism was replaced by orthodoxy. Because when people learned to think for themselves, they stopped blindly obeying. Knowledge breaks chains. 5. Religion builds in-group versus out-group psychology. Religious identity often becomes tribal. You're either in or out, saved or damned, chosen or cursed. This binary thinking breeds division, and that division breeds violence. The Crusades weren't noble missions, they were state-sanctioned invasions wrapped in holy language. Christian warriors were promised salvation for killing Muslims and Jews. The goal wasn't peace, it was conquest, justified by theology. The Inquisition didn't care about your beliefs, they cared about your obedience. Heretics were tortured not for disagreeing with God, but for undermining church control. Dissent was labeled demonic, and doubt became a punishable offense. Modern extremism isn't new, it's a continuation. Christian nationalists demonize secularism, immigrants, and non-Christians under the guise of defending godly values. Islamic fundamentalists declare jihad not as a last resort, but as a divine obligation to purge unbelievers. This isn't spirituality. It's warfare. And religion provides the ideological ammunition. Once you convince people that others are evil, less than human, or enemies of God, violence becomes not just permissible, but sacred. 6. Religion justifies economic exploitation. The church has never been poor, and that's not an accident. From medieval tithes to modern megachurches, religion has often been a financial empire disguised as salvation. The Catholic Church grew wealthy not through divine intervention, but through structured, institutional extraction. Tithes were mandatory. Indulgences were sold to absolve sin, turning forgiveness into a transaction. The richer you were, the faster your soul could be cleansed. Colonial missionaries didn't just spread the gospel, they smoothed the way for economic exploitation. In Africa and Latin America, religious missions often worked hand in hand with imperial agendas. Locals were told their suffering was God's will. Their land was taken, their labor exploited, but heaven would make it all worthwhile. This wasn't about compassion. It was about compliance. Religion made people accept suffering as divine fate, rather than man-made injustice. That's how exploitation becomes sanctified, and that's how power keeps its hands clean while others bleed. 7. Religion promotes nationalism and xenophobia. Religion, when fused with politics, becomes a tool for exclusion. It stops being about transcendence and starts being about borders, about who belongs and who doesn't. In India, Hindu nationalism has blurred the line between faith and state. Muslims and Christians are painted as invaders, threats to the cultural fabric. Laws are passed to marginalize them. Mobs are encouraged, all while invoking gods in scripture. In the United States, Christian identity is frequently weaponized. Evangelical leaders rally for immigration bans, attack non-Christian holidays, and paint secularism as an enemy. Christian values becomes a euphemism for a narrow, often white, cultural identity. Refugees are rejected. Diversity is feared, all in the name of faith. This isn't about belief, it's about control. National identity is easier to manage when it's singular, when it excludes rather than includes. Religion, when politicized, becomes a way to draw lines and punish those who cross them. 8. Religion manipulates emotional states. Religion doesn't just speak to logic, it targets your emotions. It knows how to move you, uplift you, terrify you, or control you. Music swells during worship, sermons rise in intensity, and rituals are timed for maximum psychological impact. These aren't accidental. They're finely tuned techniques. Awe, fear, guilt, euphoria. Each one serves a purpose. Fear keeps you obedient. Guilt keeps you humble. Awe keeps you submissive. Group ceremonies create emotional highs that feel transcendent, but they're also disorienting. In that moment, people are more open to suggestion, more likely to accept authority, less likely to question. This is why confession is public, why sermons emphasize sin, why prayers focus on forgiveness. The emotional manipulation is constant. You're broken, you're flawed, and you need saving, but it's only they who can save you. The goal isn't your enlightenment, it's your loyalty. Please subscribe and tell us what you think in the comment section. Okay, here's the uncomfortable truth. Religion is not inherently evil, but it is inherently useful to those who seek to control others. That's why it's been embraced by empires, tyrants, theocracies, and cult leaders for thousands of years. It offers the perfect tools: a divine source that can't be questioned, a moral code that punishes rebellion, a community structure that isolates dissenters, a narrative that rewrites history, and rituals that bind identity to obedience. These aren't accidents. They are features of a system designed not to elevate the soul, but to manage the masses. Religion teaches people what to think, not how to think. So, now what do we do with this knowledge? First, separate faith from institution. Spirituality is deeply personal. It's your right to believe, to connect with the divine, however you choose. But organized religion? That's a man-made system. And like any system, it should be questioned, challenged, and held accountable. Ask the hard questions. Who benefits from this belief? Who gets power? Who loses freedom? Deconstruct. Deprogram. Think for yourself. You don't need a priest, a book, or a temple to find truth. The divine is not locked behind a paywall of obedience. It's inside every one of us.